The very pronouncing of the word cancer scares almost everyone. With good reason. Most of us know some very sad stories that have to do with someone we really care about fighting cancer and perhaps even losing the battle. The future really is much brighter. The possibility of fighting that particular fight and winning is growing every day, and it's important to remember that. Perhaps the reason it's so important can be brought home by telling you that half of us will probably be diagnosed with cancer at some time in the future. About half the population does suffer at least one episode of cancer, and not everyone is doomed. And those who cannot win that fight become fewer in number every day. It's important to realize that it's exceptionally valuable to recognize the problem and immediately start to fight. Those who hide from it, those who fear having routine checkups, are the only ones who are going to have their risk increase. It's hard to say what cancer really is. Without question, it's a disease. Without question, it has a long list of characteristics. The difficulty comes in that it shows up in many different forms and in many different organs. It can be said to be hundreds of different diseases, therefore. Or we can stop and say, but it has a certain framework that is consistent throughout all of this field. That being the case, it is probably reasonable to think that there will be some approaches that will help us fight all cancers and some approaches that will help us fight only one or two. Cancer does have one characteristic that helps us to appreciate its progression. It goes through 3 stages. Oddly enough, the first stage is so common that it probably occurs all the time in all of us. The hitch is that initiation stage is almost without exception, fortunately, the stage where we always win the battle. On rare occasions, we don't at that stage. The disease then goes into what's usually referred to as its progression stage. Here are some kinds of cancer. Broken the way the government tends to break things into males and females, blacks and whites. The important thing to pick up from this is it doesn't make much difference what color your skin is. If you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get in trouble. The only really obvious difference between males and females is that the prostate is the primary villain for males, and breast cancer is the primary villain for females. Fortunately, these are very survivable cancers. So while they are the most common, we have a fair chance of winning the battle. Colon cancer, very curable if caught early. Lung cancer, a little less secure, but still curable. Of course, we ask for it when we smoke. We cause ourselves additional trouble. It sounds like something you've heard before, but smoking is really stupid. Cancer plays with your cells. It confuses them. It gives them incorrect information. Different cells respond in different ways, but the incorrect information usually means they end up reproducing in excess of their reasonable patterns. That excess reproduction quickly overcomes any possibility of a balance. Organs grow, we have what's referred to as a tumor. Normal cells compete reasonably for nutrients and space. They respond to their environment exactly the way anything that's alive does. They have controls built into their systems. It's referred to as contact inhibition. When they come in contact with other cells, There are reasons why. Their reproductive habits quiet. Cancer doesn't get the signal. There are kinds of cancer. It's a bit of a vocabulary list on this slide, and it's a good one. You can live without really appreciating the difference between a carcinoma and a sarcoma. But if you hear them, you can recognize them as indicating a bit more information perhaps than you thought. They'll tell you where the cancer is located. Obviously, carcinomas have more in common with other carcinomas, sarcomas with other sarcomas. That doesn't mean they don't have a great deal in common with each other. Lymphoma, no surprise, related to lymph glands. Leukemia, while it does exist in adults, is a child's cancer. We've actually won that battle. Leukemia can be cured. It's not fun. It's a horror to think your own child might suffer from such a disease, but a good fight is winnable. The term metastatic tumor refers to a tumor that's sending out seeds for new tumors that will migrate around in your body, basically riding free in your bloodstream, and will find other sites where they're acceptable and they will grow there. This, of course, is one of the things we fear most about cancer, that it proliferates through the body, causes trouble in one place and then begins to cause trouble in many places. This is still a winnable battle, but we don't know as much as we should, and this is where we'll probably end up defeating cancer. There are some very promising reports, very recent promising reports, about fighting cancer at this stage. This, of course, is where we use chemotherapy and many of the other immunotherapies that are beginning to move from the theoretical to the practical realm. Benign tumors aren't cancer. Not that anyone wants anything wrong with them, but if you're going to have a tumor, a benign tumor is definitely the way to go. A benign tumor will not metastasize. It may grow and cause trouble by virtue of its size, but it can be removed without the fear of metastasis causing new tumors in other places. Precancerous tumors, these are the things that a dermatologist is going to look for on your skin. These are the things that someone looking in a colonoscopy can spot and recognize as places that must be carefully dealt with to avoid colon cancers. They're recognizable by experts. When you have something on your skin that looks odd, let the doctor say it's okay. Don't make convenient assumptions. The initiation phase is that phase that happens so often we don't even know about it, and our bodies almost always win the fight. A small cancer is triggered, a small mutation, a nasty response to some undesirable xenobiotic substance. We almost always win there. Progression is when a very precise series of steps takes place that permits a single cell to develop into a tumor, to develop the characteristics that will permit it to metastasize. The cancer then is quite vulnerable. It can be fixed by your body, by your immune system, or by relatively non-aggressive attacks by the medical profession. It is the metastasis that we fear. It is at that stage that it's essential we use harsh remedies such as chemotherapy. In all cases, it's common to remove the tumor if possible. It certainly is better out of your body than in your body. Sadly, with the third stage, it is sometimes almost impossible to be sure you've removed all of the tumor and its progeny. This is why chemotherapy is considered a practical approach. It will attack small cancers that were not identified and could not be, therefore, removed by surgery. Immunotherapy, in much the same sense, will attack what you might have missed if you were simply observing and examining. Both are very promising. Really, initiation doesn't usually cause trouble. We don't even know it's happened most of the time. Certain mutations can cause certain steps in tumor progression, the second stage. But commonly it fails because the progression is so specific. Supposedly a picture is worth 1,000 words. The 1,000 words are on the right. You can, of course, perhaps you should, stop the flow of slides for a moment and read what's written down. It's basically a review. But by all means, walk through the pictures with me. The initiation stage is simple. A cell here, a cell there, has a problem. Most of them simply are eliminated. Sadly, the more environmental assaults, the more likely there will be additional cells having these problems. There comes a point where we can swamp any system. If our natural protection stops working, one of these initiation phase cells survives. It only takes one to survive, but it's rare that one survives. If it does, however, it will grow, it will reproduce, it will make eventually a tumor. There are things that make it easier for tumors to grow. There are promoters. Again, something to use as a target for eliminating cancer. We have many defenses. We have many promoters. As the cell grows, it begins to invade areas that ought to be occupied by other kinds of cells, and these are not normal cells. There is a point where, unless the growth stops, a tumor that can be simply removed by surgery exists. There are instances of unusually large tumors that are removed. The patient is then fine. It will not hold for all tumors. That's our problem, of course. If the tumor tissue breaks free, enters the bloodstream, it is then on a highway to just about any place that it might find a convenient rooting area. It attaches and begins to grow again. We have metastasis. Metastasis in that we now have additional tumors beginning to develop. This, of course, is the most serious, most threatening stage in cancer. And still, here, there are times, many of them, when chemotherapy helps. Cures, perhaps, would be the better word. A cure is a relative thing. Usually it's said that after 5 years, if there is no recurrence, the cancer was beaten. You are cured. So initiation is common, probably the result of an initiator, something that shouldn't have been there, often can be eliminated by our body's defenses, by a good solid set of proper nutrients. Progression is far, far less common. But it can result, especially with repeated assaults from environmental materials that shouldn't be there. And again, it can still be eliminated or reversed by the right nutrients, by the right treatments, and by our body's capacity to fight in immunological terms. Metastasis is, of course, the most serious of the phases of cancer. It's not as easily attacked, but much can be cured even there. Our success rate is lower, and the future is very promising. I thought you might find this interesting. It's just a picture from a government server. We are looking along the spinal cord. The center part is the bone. We're looking at kidneys. On the right, shown by the yellow arrow, is a tumor in a kidney, but it's actually a tumor that's made up of lung cells, clearly the result of metastasis. So, who's vulnerable? Every one of us. You, me, the guy sitting next to you. In some ways, it's probably good. About half of us will be diagnosed with cancer at some time in our lives. The first thought you have to have from that is it's disturbing, but perhaps in a way it's a positive statement, because it should force you to realize that cancer is not automatically doomed.